Hello and welcome Wednesday. What is back? Today we are going to be doing a rundown of Tinto Talks number 32, which is for the upcoming Big Secret Big Top, codename Project Teaser game, which is Europa Universalis 5, except it's not because it's Project Teaser, where we are going to be reviewing specifically revolutions and separatist movements, really kind of like the mechanics and how things are shaping up in this regard. I do like the way the things sound, and so pretty excited for this dev diary. It's not incredibly long, but let's get into it. Welcome to another Tinto Talks, the Happy Wednesday, of course, Big Nice, where we talk about our upcoming, unannounced, uncensored, unleashed game, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious game with codename Project Teaser. They just misspelled it, Project Kaiser. It's definitely Project Teaser because it's nothing but a tease because it's unteased. No, wait, it's not unteased. It's on everything else but teased. Teased it has been had. But today we will talk about what happens when some of your pops in the country are not entirely convinced of its greatness. Wow, what a great way to say separatist movements. We will be getting into rebel factions. There are going to be 5 different categories that a rebel faction could belong to. A nationalist for all independence movements. Pretender for when they want another ruler, man, the truth hurts. Slave for when they want to be free, can't have that. A religious, if a different religious group they want independence. If a different religious group they want independence, else they want to convert the country. Okay. A state for when they are really unhappy and want their society to change. That's true. And we will have a little screenshot here where we have Sardinia patriots, as we like to call them. Wow, patriots. Don't you mean rebels? Don't you mean betrayers? But okay. We see the number of pops, we see locations, and we see support rebels. I assume that's foreign countries, maybe? These rebels are working towards Sardinian independence. They will create a revolt when they are ready. That's fair. A fair number of pops in 12 locations. This could be a challenge. Pops and rebel factions. Now let's go back to Tinto Talks number 17. Simpler times, back before the dark times when the Happy Wednesday was missed. Where we will first mention that pops have satisfaction and that it is low enough that is low enough a pop will join a rebel faction. The levels at which a pop join or leave a faction will have some different factors, and I really like the way that they are introducing relatively simplistic mechanics, but then a whole lot of modifiers, and this is one of the things where there will be a threshold that is influenced by a variety of factors in terms of satisfaction. So like if you're very stable, it will require more or it will require lower satisfaction to make them rebellious. If you're unstable, it will be the reverse. And so we have a variety of influences on what is a system that is otherwise kind of relatively simple seeming. But the way to keep a pop from joining a rebel is to make sure that they are satisfied with life. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the Sardinian peasants in Caligari, which have recently been conquered by Aragon just before the start of the game. We will be able to see, if we kind of zoom in here, there are a bunch of commoners. Their view of Catalan is not giving us any kind of benefits, which I assume is our primary culture. We will see 5%, 25%, so that's 30%, around 40% after tolerance of Catholicism, prices for the needs of population. And this is kind of an important one because if you dump prices or can find ways to decrease prices for need, you can, stave off rebellions. And then we see lacking wine and legumes, which is, truly a terrible thing. Everyone loves wine and beans. That's what legume is. It is, in fact, a bean. And then, what is the... There's something that belongs to the legume family that doesn't seem like that it should belong to the legume family, and okay, it's peanuts. Yeah, peanuts are beans. You heard it here first, unless you heard it before. Friendly armies in province. You can, of course, stack armies into place to make it less rebellious. Temple, we see the influence of a building here, which is going to be, there's various ways that you can influence things, right? We can influence the prices of wine, we can influence having a friendly army there, we can build a temple, and having all these levers by which we can interact with the mechanic that is relatively simple because it's just if satisfaction is above a certain threshold, we're going to have problems. I really like that the overall system is simple, but there is a lot of depth, and this is kind of my perception and is one of the reasons why I'm really excited about EU5, Project Caesar. If pop satisfaction is below 18%, so that's our current threshold equilibrium that we have because of a variety of factors, the pop will join a rebel. It will become loyal again if satisfaction rises above 29.74%, and I believe if you add all these up, because, man, that conquered modifier, that's a sick one, huh? It's definitely going to be below 18%, so they're just going to be rebellious. For some reason, the people tend to be a bit upset when conquered. That's true. Sadly, we cannot make the commoners estate more happy in Aragon as they are already at. We cannot make the commoners estate more happy in Aragon as they are already 100% satisfaction. So the 25% bonus is the maximum we can get. So this is from the estate here for the commoners. We can't make that is not a lever by which we can make them more happy. I guess we could unconquer them. Except we can't. We'll never release them, never let go. Otherwise, to make states happy, you can always reduce taxes or grant more privileges, so this is a lever. One obvious solution here is to make them integrated, which would reduce the conquered penalty of 50% to 10%. Also, this 50% penalty, this seems really big, and I don't have the broader context of the game with which to kind of evaluate how big this actually is, but it seems quite large, and I think that this is probably a pretty strong anti-blobbing mechanic, which in general I am kind of a fan of, because you shouldn't be able to blob in like 1400 as hard, and then you will find ways through technology and various levers to reduce this penalty or find other ways of decreasing, the liberty desire such that expanding later on gets better. Okay, however, that will take 25 years, which may not be quick enough to avoid an uprising. If we build a castle, that would add another 10% to satisfaction, and we could also station an army there to keep the peasants in line, the classic riffraff. As they lack access to wine and beans, and currently, and this could be peanut butter, you know what? Really, this is just a peanut butter sandwich. This is all we need to give them. Grapes, you make jelly, legumes, obviously that's peanuts for peanut butter. Really, they just need more peanut butter and jelly in their life. And currently trade in the Muslim market, we could try and deny market access to Al Jazeera, and there would be slightly happier as the wine would be easier to get from an Italian market. And so I think that this sentence here really kind of highlights one of the things that I'm really enjoying about reading about this game and makes me super excited about this game, because this is kind of a creative solution that you can think of at the time that, okay, the overall system is really simple, right? There's a threshold where if you're above it, you rebel, if you're below it, you rebel, and if you're above it, you don't rebel, and this is a simplistic system. But there is enough depth to the system and kind of interlaced mechanics that we can come up with something like, hey, we can change which market the state is in so that it will change what the cost of the goods are there, so that this will influence how the satisfaction of the pops, such that we can avoid a revolution by forcing them into the Italian market instead of the Muslim market, which doesn't have a lot of wine, or it doesn't have a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And this is like a layer of depth where you can come up with creative decisions in order to influence something in a way that is going to benefit you, but it is not overly complex and overbearing in order to learn it, right? So the example I've used like a dozen times has been chess. Chess is a game you can learn in an afternoon. You can spend 10,000 hours like trying to play chess better and better, and you'll still be getting better as you're learning more and more and more, and you still won't be able to beat Magnus Carlsen. You can beat him, but then you'd have to wake up and apologize because you'd be dreaming, right? Except you'd wake up and the nightmare would begin. Okay, but kind of moving back to this is a system like this, in my mind, exemplifies depth without adding complexity. Because, boy oh boy, this is simple, right? But that you can come up with creative solutions like this is depth. Okay, all of the world would make satisfaction positive at least, but we need to get it above 29.74, which is not feasible right now. You're telling me. A stable country has a higher threshold for rebels to join, and this is kind of what we were talking about earlier. If we had positive stability, this would increase the threshold by which pops are going to be joining, this is reducing the threshold so that your satisfaction has to be even lower in order for pops to join the rebels, so we could see that the stability is going to be positive. I mixed my pluses with my minuses there. But we will see base value, and then we will see tech influencing things, right? We have communalism. And so this 50% may be really, really hard to overcome in the early game, right? This 50% value, but as you get more techs and you get more levers by which you can actually influence satisfaction, then it might be, and you build more buildings and this type of stuff. We can see some of these like levers here. As you acquire more peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, it can get easier to blob out or to reduce the negative effect of blobbing here, which is our kind of rebels that we have from the newly conquered country. Sadly, we cannot yet use the pacify region cabinet action. Here's yet another lever, which will give you, you will get in the Age of Absolution. Again, this is going to be later on, which reduces the threshold for joining rebels by 5 to 10%, depending on the competence of your monarch and your cabinet. Now, is this tied to a specific state, or is this just an overall modifier? If it's just an overall modifier, this is going to help you to blob out quite considerably, right? If we go back to the rebel, factions again, not like this, we're going to rebel again. Then they have progress value with when it reaches 100%, and there here the rebels, which will take about 23. Wait. And here, the rebels, which will take about 23 years, so the uprising is likely to happen before integration is done. I don't know how I feel about this sentence. Unless you weaken their power or increase control over their territories so that they get less money. Okay, we're going to read this sentence again, because this one was a little bit rough, perhaps for me. If we go back to the rebel factions again, they have a progress value, where when it reaches a 100%, and then here's another clause, and the rebels... And here the rebels, okay, which will take about 23 years, so that the uprising is likely to happen before integration is done. Because integration, I think, took 25 years. This takes 23 years until the uprising. So this is unlikely to happen before integration is done. Or sorry, the uprising is likely, unless you can weaken their power or increase their control over their territories so that they get less money. This is interesting. We can weaken rebellions by increasing control. Again, this is the system is relatively simple. Generally speaking, increasing control is going to be beneficial, and it will allow you to leverage states better. And we see kind of an inverse where if you have low control, the rebels are going to get more power. And so here, the rebels, the progress is being informed by this lack of control. Again, the system is relatively... so the system's complex because it's a paradox game, but given all the kind of things you're tracking, it is relatively simple. Relatively. I was about to say relative to... I was going to be redundant with the relative bit, but sadly, Sardinia is a bit too far down the road from Barcelona, which of course decreases control, and your inability to gain control is going to be another thing that it's going to be kind of low in the early game. So what happens when a rebel faction progresses to 100% then? Well, one of two things will happen. Either there will be a civil war or a revolt. First, the rebel faction forms a new country with a relevant name and takes ownership of the locations where it has strong support. Revolts. If they are the rebel type that wants to be independent, then they will start a revolt, which is almost a war where defender can re-annex any revolter without further aggressive expansion and can always afford the peace cost. If the culture of the revolting countries is from a country that exists on the map, they will call in the country they used to be a part of into the revolt, and if they join and the war is won, the revolter will become part of the country that they belonged to in the past. Okay, so pretty straightforward. And it is... I really like that there's different types of rebellions and this type of thing, but I think there have always been different types of rebellions in EU4, which of course this game is EU5, except it's Project Teaser. Civil War, these are started by pretenders, some religious rebels, or state-type rebels. Civil wars work differently than other wars in that you do not have to negotiate a peace. In a civil war, and I don't think this is how it operates in EU4. But I can't really recall. And in EU4, you create, like, stacks are created rather than secessions, right? It's been a while since I played EU4, so I don't remember how the Civil War mechanics work there. But in Civil War, as soon as you would have taken control of the location from a siege or occupation, the location would immediately flip to the ownership of that location instead. This means that civil wars are almost always fought to the bitter end, and only one country can survive. end of the Civil War. As the system has a few similarities to the Civil War system of Imperator Rome, we will have to alleviate some concerns here. In Project Caesar, there is no game over when you lose a Civil War. Man, I wish this was the case in Vic 3. Vic 3 is like, well, it's a bit complicated, but Victoria 3, you can get like weirdly game overed in instances where great powers join on either side of your war. When you're having a revolt, or very substantive powers, and then you don't know which one actually looks like they're going to win. You switch sides, or you stay on the same side, and then one GP commits an enormous amount of resources, and another GP commits almost nothing, and if you guessed wrong, you just game over. And that is extremely frustrating with it when it happens. It's very rare now. It used to be very common in 1.3. But this gaming over when you lose a Civil War in general just kind of is a bit of a feels bad mechanic because you just lose the run. But okay. But instead you have the option to continue as the winning side. The problem is you can intentionally lose wars and then continue as the winning side in the case of Victoria 3, and you can use this to influence very, very significantly what you are going to have in terms of your political situation. So it's to prevent cheese, but okay. It still leads to very, very rarely leads to situations that are extraordinarily frustrating. But I guess sometimes runs have to die, so maybe that's okay. One thing to consider here is that the winner will have different rulers, maybe a different religion, perhaps a new government type, dramatic changes to societal values, and reforms, and or privileges. Okay. After all, if the peasant revolts and you win, you will not keep your glorious full serfdom monarchy as it once was, which of course makes sense. And I think that this is... I've never been extremely good at EU4, but I think this is the bread and butter of the EU4, like, kind of cheesy cheekiness in doing strange things, is creating revolutions or rebel stacks and then intentionally losing to them, which will be interesting to see if we see kind of a return of intentionally losing to the rebels so that they can enforce maybe getting off a full serfdom monarchy. But okay, we see Civil War lost, a little bit of a screen here. The Scots Civil War is over. Luckily for us, this is not the end, but maybe a new opportunity. And we do From Ashes Comes a New Life. We will continue to play as Scotland, and then it's time to pay. And then I really wish I knew what the end of this was, because I'm curious what the other option yields. Do we just swap to another country? Do we just like go to the main menu? What happens here? Probably to the main menu, but okay. You don't have to continue. You can pick from another option for the game over screen, or you can pick the other option for the game over screen. Okay, so we can get a game over screen. Fantastic. Okay, next week we will talk more about Happy Wednesdays. We will wish you a Happy Wednesday always and forever, and we will never forget the week where the Happy Wednesday was missed. Okay, next week we will talk more about diplomacy and what that will mean for most of you. Will be something you're already aware of, but we will list quite a few new aspects. Really, so diplomacy in particular is something that we're going to be kind of paying a little bit of attention to, from our primarily being Vic 3 oriented type of perspective, because in particular, the diplomatic play, we're really not a fan of in its kind of entirety. Although diplomacy has gotten a lot better in Vic 3 with the kind of creation of, or the introduction of the mechanic for diplomatic catalysts. It's a lot less schizophrenic, but I'm very keen on seeing kind of what's been cooked up in Tinto, where we can maybe see some new mechanics and this type of stuff. But overall, just very kind of pleased looking at how Civil Wars are handled, and in particular, all these different modifiers and, levers by which you can kind of try and influence a thing, and maybe in terms of gameplay patterns, get creative in this sort of stuff. Really, some of the things that are most enjoyable about playing games is getting this aha moment where you figure out a way to handle an issue that you've not done before, and you don't just approach the same problem exactly the same every single time. And I think that the mechanics are kind of looking good in that regard, and are also not just like random mechanics, but parts of a simulation that make sense. I definitely get upset when I do not have my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, just like the Sardinian peasants of Caligari, so I know what's up. Or Cagliari. Oh man, I mispronounced it 5 times. There's definitely going to be an Italian that corrects me in chat, not like this. But, other than that, Just want to wish you all a happy Wednesday, of course. And, oh yeah, the YouTube algorithm stuff, likes, comment, subscribe, all that like nonsense, links below, etc., etc. The important thing, the critical thing here is, of course, the happy Wednesday.